got a comment from an old guitar student of mine, and they were asking about sweep picking. I thought it might be interesting to do a video on that because I'm quite bad at sweep picking. I used to be quite good at it, and I have some thoughts about how you develop the technique that have worked well for myself and for some students I taught. And you're going to get to see me screw it up a lot. So hopefully this will be a bit of a learning experience and it won't be very glamorous. So some quick general thoughts on sweep picking, right? So first of all, the main point of sweep picking is to play arpeggios faster, right? You can certainly play them without sweep picking. It's mostly for playing things faster. So if you don't know what an arpeggio is, if you don't know how chord progressions work, you're going to be like someone learning to drive faster before they can steer. So I'd strongly recommend just getting enough music theory to get together that you know about the chords in a key, right? Nothing more complicated than that. The reason that I used to be good at sweep picking and now I'm not is because I honestly don't think it's that useful, right? Unless you really love those kind of like long Jason Becker-esque kind of sweep arpeggio sequences, I just find I never ended up using it, like, ever. Maybe that's the kind of player you are, the kind of player you want to emulate. Definitely learn it. There's some really interesting stuff about sweep picking as well. So even though I will caveat and say that it's not something I generally use, you learn a lot of really useful things by learning to do it. So maybe it's worth doing just as an experiment. So firstly, sweep picking really requires you to be disciplined. It's not a technique that's very easy to fake it until you make it. You kind of have to have some discipline. You have to start slow, you have to build up, you have to make sure it's always clean, you have to make sure you mute strings, or else you end up with a horrible sloppy mess. So I think for those reasons it's actually a useful technique to try out, right? Just because it's really interesting to do something so demanding on the instrument. It also requires a lot of coordination between the fretting hand and the picking hand. If you don't line these up perfectly, it's going to sound terrible. And I think generally just having something which requires that much concentration is probably good for your playing anyway, right? Even if you're not going to use it that much. And who knows, you might have a lot of fun learning it. So, yeah, basically the way most sweep picking tutorials on the internet work is that you'll start with a 2-string or 3-string motion, and you'll slowly extend that out to bigger arpeggios. I have a different school of thought on this, which is that you want to start with 5-string arpeggios, and you want to start with the C-shape ones. So that's referring to the caged system. So yes, there will be some music theory here because we're talking about arpeggios. So if none of these terms make sense to you, you probably, once again, don't want to be learning to drive faster before you can steer. So if we took an A minor C-shape arpeggio there on the 12th fret A string. The reason I really like teaching this shape is, first of all, it's fairly comfortable, right? There's no extreme stretches. There's no finger rolling, which is really important. Some shapes you need to roll one finger across 2 strings, which can be quite difficult at the first. And the reason I really like 5-string arpeggios to start is that you're going to be doing the sweep picking motion across more strings. So if you do a 3-string arpeggio, it's been a long time since I've done one of these, you're only really doing quite a short motion before you're returning across the previous strings. And I think then you can kind of get away with this kind of quite sloppy motion, which doesn't generalize well, which doesn't end up working for more complex sweeping patterns. And what you really want is one long, smooth pick stroke. So this is how far through the lesson we've gone before talking about the general idea. Sweep picking is the technique of playing one continuous down or up stroke through a series of notes on different strings. So crucially, you really don't want to do a whole bunch of like little downstrokes, right? Even though it's kind of the same, it's not the same. You want to do one picking motion, right? And similarly for upstrokes. One thing that's really important is to make sure you practice both ascending and descending sweep picking evenly, because you'll find that a lot of people will practice one more than the other, and sometimes you'll end up noticing you do a slightly different technique for going down and going up, and then you're wasting practice time, right? You should be practicing it one way, right, every time. So I like to do a kind of motion mostly from the elbow, so my wrist is pretty relaxed, but it's one movement, right? It's not 5 small ones. It's one movement. Excuse me. Then the other thing you have to do is you have to line up the left hand notes with that. So in this case, I like to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, and I would just do that a whole bunch if I was starting, right? And then also descending. And I'm being very careful with my string muting. So that's first of all left hand string muting. Each finger is unfretting just as the note concludes. And with the right hand, the palm is, sorry, the fleshy bit of the thumb is treading along directly behind the pick stroke. So if I did it with open strings, that's not very pretty, but yeah, it's a bit nicer, right? So you can choose how tightly you want to mute. And then descending, you have to be careful to not only defret, but it's a really good idea if you can leave your first finger kind of sitting a little bit to mute. So I would honestly take that pattern and I would do that for a week. So maybe like half an hour a day, every day for a week until you're kind of comfortable doing that. There's the major version of that as well. Right, and you should know the difference between major and minor arpeggios, so you should be fine with that. Then I would add on an additional note here with an upstroke, so 5 downs, 1 up. Okay, and then you have to reverse that for, you have to reverse that for descending. So that would be down, up, 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 right? So you're picking every single note. Whew, a bit sloppy. So once you have that basic technique down, that's fairly easy to generalize around to other things. And as soon as you can, I'd advise practicing something a bit more musically interesting, right? So I quite like, what's it called? Canon in D, right? So that's D major, A major, B minor, F sharp minor, G, D, G, A. Right? Any chord progression you like, because it's basically the same technique anyway. And then you can add more ambitious arpeggio shapes. I quite like the 3-octave one, so doing the E shape, so say we're doing A major, doing the E shape up until the G string, sliding up, and then doing the D shape from there, if you're feeling cheeky. So it's a bit of a ramble, right? But I would say, broadly speaking, start slow. Make sure you're doing the same technique evenly throughout the whole sweep pick stroke. Make sure you're consistently muting strings correctly, both ascending and descending, right? Make sure you have your fingers unfretting as you finish each note. That's really important for getting it to sound clean as you speed up. I think actually once you get the hang of it, it only takes a few months to start feeling really comfortable with it. And then if you want to, you can start grinding away at the metronome and really pushing the speed barrier. I hope that was instructive and somewhat interesting. Thank you.